Stay at Work Kentucky presents the Americans with Disabilities Act and Disability Etiquette, featuring Jason Jones.
I'm Jason Jones. I work for the University of Kentucky's Human Development Center. I'm the mentoring coordinator for the Retain program and the Southeast liaison to the Southeast ADA Center. At the end of the day, it's just a civil rights law to make things a little bit more equal. It's not special treatment. I think we really need to get rid of that idea or that way of thinking, because it really is just about equality. I think without the ADA, we would have seen much less significant integration of people with disabilities in society. I think it just gives people the opportunity to do things, have a family, and just the ability to go into businesses and that kind of stuff so they're accessible, so I can actually do that. Your identity comes from a lot of different things, but a big chunk of that is your job. I've worked in positions that I really didn't like, and it affected the rest of my life at times, And so when you're doing something, you feel like you're contributing, because we all really, at the end of the day, want to belong to something. Also, I think there's a side that we don't talk about enough of just being visual. If you look at a workforce and everybody looks the same, then it's not really a true picture of what the world is like. And when we eliminate, or when we put barriers in the way of people with disabilities or whatever the different minority is, it makes that picture not really accurate of what the world is really about. When you have legislation of this type, always the cost is always sort of a misconception, that you're required to do a lot of things that you aren't necessarily required to do. Some of the biggest misconception is that what we talked about before is that it's some kind of special treatment for people with disabilities. The ADA is such a cool thing because it was unanimous. This was a Republican and a Democrat working together. It was signed by a Republican president, and it was unanimous in the Senate, which is bizarre. I don't even know if today we can even comprehend the idea of something that was voted on by everyone. And that's where, and over the years too, there's been a solid effort to keep it strong. And advocacy is that's a great point, because it took more than people with disabilities to get the law passed. Some of the strongest advocates in the world are family members, or somebody that's just been touched in some way by someone. We were looking for a hotel room for one of my son's concerts, and his band teacher said, well, I called and checked the hotels to find out if they had accessible rooms. This is a person who has no tie whatsoever to the disability world, other than he sees me coming to the concerts and goes, hey, he wants to go. We need to, help him find a place. And that's the stuff, it's a quality of life issue. And I think the ADA specifically, and just the advocacy that brought it to the forefront, we should talk more under the idea of it created, or still continues to create, a more quality of life for people with disabilities and their families too. So it really covers anybody that has, a disability. It can really be applied almost to anybody. We all need just a boost. You couldn't do your tire without a jack, right? Is a jack assistive technology then? So of course it is. It's the same thing. If I can't interface with my computer, then I need something to interface with my computer that gives me the ability to do all the functions of what that device can do. The ADA really is for all of us. And I think the point that I've made for years is that we're all 2 seconds away from needing it. A car wreck, or a debilitating disease, or a child's born with a disability, or whatever those things are. And so if we can be empathetic and put ourselves in those situations, we can realize pretty quickly that the ADA is for everybody, not just for, the people that you think it's obvious for. Undue hardship, the idea behind it is, so you have a, mom and pop business that has, 20 to 25 employees, because if it's under 15, they're exempt anyway. They're in a building with 2 floors. They want to hire somebody, but they don't want to have to spend $50,000 to renovate so they could put an elevator in, those kinds of things. So, it basically is the idea of the bottom line. Is it going to cost me more than it's worth? We can't really afford this, but it also gives the business and the person that's wanting to be hired the ability to go, okay, but let's look at something else, right? We can afford a $100,000 renovation, but can we move the desk from upstairs to downstairs? Is there a place other than there that I can work? Is there a different entrance we can use? It's usually just looking at things in a different way or from a different angle, and finding a new way to accommodate. It's usually nothing at all. One of the coolest stories I ever heard was a guy in Seattle that came in, and there was a woman who, back when they were using files for everything, before electronic files were serious, and he came in and they paid him like 10 grand as a consultant to figure this out, because this person had been working with him for 30 years, and he was like, have you tried a ruler? Because she didn't have enough strength to pull the file folders apart when they were tight. And he's like, stuck a ruler in, pushed it just a little bit, it gave enough leverage, and she pulled it right like it was nothing. It's like, he said, I can make you the fanciest ruler you want for $15. Carbonite, steel, stainless steel, whatever you want. And so a lot of times it really, undue hardship is hard to prove when sometimes you just need somebody that's looking from the right angle to figure out what the problem is and how they can fix it. But it really always starts with an employer, and I think that's where we really have a shortfall in hiring people with disabilities, is that I want people, as a person with disability, I don't want you to hire me because it's going to look good in a paper. I bust my butt for 40 hours plus a week, and I get done what needs to be done, and I affect your bottom line in a positive way, and I show up. So if a person doesn't want to accommodate in any way and they're digging their heels in, I think it kind of goes back to the same idea of a ramp into a building, right? If you don't want to put a ramp in your building, it means you don't want my business, right? This is not a place that wants somebody with a disability. And that knocks a lot of people out when you're talking about 30% of the population. So it's good business to hire people with disabilities, and it's good business to accommodate. It just, at the end of the day, it's about human capital. Like, lean into it, right? And then I think if we look at it that way, instead of, well, we have to hire a certain amount of people or whatever, it's a little easier sell to go, oh, well, this bottom line is like, 20% better than it would have been had we not hired this person. When you're defining disability etiquette, I think it's important to bring up the point that it's scary for people. And that's sad, because, the stuff we've talked about for years in the disability community is the inclusion factor and being part of life and quality of life. And disability etiquette is just, sort of the way you act around somebody with a disability. It's just interacting with somebody on a personal level and forgetting that they have a disability, and good for them. Disability etiquette is just learning the best way to interact with someone with a disability in a way that makes both parties comfortable, and that's something we don't say enough to. We got to lower the boundary a little bit. You can't change things until both sides realize that something needs to be. I teach on the etiquette all the time, but at the end of the day, I'd rather just have a conversation where you didn't have to worry about saying the wrong thing. I mean, I've had people do everything, from the example always is trying to shake my hand. It's like, I look up and I say, I can't shake, and I'm embarrassed for them, because you can see it in their face like, oh God, I screwed up. It's like, you did not screw up, you're fine. I always feel bad for the person on the other end, and they think they're offending me. It's like, I'm not offended, man, because you're red in the face and feel like you've just, really tripped over something, and you're okay. There's something someone needs in every group, whether you see it or not. Maybe it's affirmation. Maybe it's just feeling like, you belong. Maybe it's somebody really just kind of likes to be left alone. So I think as a coworker, don't be nervous. Treat somebody like you would treat anybody else, and don't be afraid to ask questions. We're all going to mess up. So I think it comes down to the end of the day to give grace and to receive grace well, and then I think it's a much better environment for everybody. So from an etiquette perspective, pay attention, listen, include, ask questions.
Retain Kentucky is funded by the U.S. Department of Labor and the Social Security Administration under a grant award of $21,600,000 to the Kentucky Office of Employment and Training that will be incrementally provided. 100% of grant funding is from U.S. federal funds. This product does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of the U.S. Department of Labor or the Social Security Administration, nor does mention of trade names, commercial products, or organizations imply endorsement by the U.S. government. Please visit us at stayatworkky.org